What's up, Podgo people? This is Steve Strelacci, and today I wanted to go through a fresh preset build from scratch. No real plan in mind at all for a specific tone. Just wanted to show my workflow of how I go about building a tone from scratch. I have a bunch of these for the Helix and the HX Stomp, but I figured it'd be cool to start doing these for the Podgo. So I'm going to use an amp that doesn't seem to be very popular. I haven't even really used one of these before, but I'm kind of a Tim Pierce fanboy, and I know that he's got a Park 75, so I wanted to try and make that sound good. Never used it before, never made a preset with it before, so this is going to be my first time on the fly. So I'm going to take you to Podgo Edit, and we are going to build a tone from scratch with it. Okay, so we got the amp here. I'm going to throw my cans on. So if you guys are new to the channel, haven't seen, I use the Beyerdynamic DT770s, and these are great for me. Turn them up nice and loud, and they give me a good translation to a live PA. So out of the box, let's hear what this sounds like. By the way, this is my Gibson Les Paul CM with the P90. Such a great guitar. All right, so yeah, back to the preset out of the box. Very okay. Kind of floppy and mushy in my opinion. So, how do I want to start? Let's take a look at the cab first. I like to experiment with the cab first because I feel like that would be one of the first things that you would do normally anyway, is take a look at the cab, see what it sounds like. I'm going to bring up this low cut because I kind of like how it sounds on the top end. I like the sizzle of the 57. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the microphone, using the 57 dynamic mic and putting it close to the cabinet will give you that nice high-end sizzle without getting too harsh. In some cases it can, but it seems like with the black back it sounds pretty good so far. And then one of my first moves is always to drop the gain and drop the bass. The stock settings in all of these have so much low end and so much drive that I think it sounds way better just cutting those out right away. We're already getting a lot more clarity and punch just from this slight adjustment. So we're still a little tad bit lifeless, so I'm just gonna click around here with some stuff that I think in my ear is gonna help this sound better. And I'm already starting to plan ahead in my head as I go. Let's bring this up a little bit. I'm gonna take away some of the sag. I feel like the sag is making it too squishy. Bring up the biases. I like having the biases up. That seems to make a really big difference. Now we're starting to get that good sizzle and that good starting point for a tone. All right, so let's leave this as is for right now, and cab we could leave alone for right now. I'm going to take this EQ and I'm going to drag it to the front end, and I'm going to change this to the Cali Q graphic. If I did this in a live stream, or I did it in some video previously, where I like using the Cali graphic EQ as kind of like the front end push to my amp, instead of using like an overdrive pedal or a distortion pedal. Use this to push the front end of the amp. So let's experiment with these. I've explained this in a couple of my videos where you can use this EQ to experiment and train your ear for EQ. So if I hit a chord, hit a chord and go to both extremes of the EQ frequency and see what you like and what you don't like. tend to think of the 240 as a boxy frequency, so I usually wind up cutting that down. 750 is going to be more like a Minotaur tube screamer type of frequency that if you push it, gets that nice nasally bark. So I usually like to bring that up a little. 2200 is another good one that you could bring up. Hear what it sounds like maxed out. So that's definitely a sizzly frequency. We just want to add that sparingly. 2.6. Yeah, 2.6. Nice, we're getting there. So this 6600, you could hear it sounds like it disappears without it. Add a very little bit of that. 2 decibels. Now we are really getting somewhere. Let's hear what this sounds like without this. So we're getting a little bit more of a defined sound with, just subtle EQing. So I'm going to experiment with taking this drive down and pushing the front end of the amp like 5 dB. So it's just a gain exchange, if you want to call it that. I'm taking away the gain from the amp and I'm adding it by hitting the front end of the amp. It's a weird thought, but I like the way that this sounds a little bit better, or I hope so. Now we're getting into that nice sizzly, crunchy territory. So this is how I would start building a preset. So these 3 things, EQ, amp, and cab, would be my first priority, to define the meat and potatoes of the sound. I could take these 3, copy it over, and make 100 different presets with different pedal combinations, but this is definitely how I would start one out. I'm gonna check my tuning. It's so humid here, and strings are getting rusty. Okay. So that's a good starting point with the P90 here. So with this crunchy type of amp, you can look this up too, look up what these amps have and what they don't have. I don't think it comes with reverb, but I'm gonna add my own room reverb. Let me go over to here, click on the reverb. Let's make it a room reverb. By the way, if you're new to PodGo or you're curious or you don't want to burn an effects block on this reverb, let's turn that off. You have early reflections here, and this can give you like kind of a faux room reverb. So here's what this sounds like. So it just gives you a little bit more of the room sound compared to without it. It's not exactly reverb, but if you're in a pinch and you don't want to waste a block on reverb pedal, you can crank up these early reflections and it'll give you a decent sound. So yeah, now this is the actual room reverb. One of my favorites in the HX family here. Add a little more decay. I usually put this in a parallel effect loop if I'm using the Helix or the PodGo. if I'm using the Helix or the Stomp, I'll put this in a separate parallel effects chain. So instead of doing that, I'm going to add like an 80 millisecond pre-delay. So it lets that transient note stick through, and then the reverb has a nice decay underneath it. I don't really understand what these high and low cuts do for the reverb. I just know that I take them off and I prefer without them. Cool. So we're building nice little sound here. What else? Let's actually get a distortion pedal for this. And I have no plan here, so I have no idea what I'm going to do. I love the Diana drive. It's one of my favorites. I'm going to kind of do what I think is going to sound good. Cool. We could probably add a little more gain to that. Hit the front end a little bit harder. See, this is where it's starting to get to the point where it's almost in like a fuzz territory, which I don't like, so I might be hitting the front end a little too hard. So I'm going to bring that back, bring some of that drive down, bring up that voice a little. So I'm basically making the overdrive a little bit more subtle, still shaping the sound, but it's a little more subtle now. And that's going to be probably a nice lead pedal. I'm now going to move my volume pedal. You can experiment with this. I'm going to put it after the amp and cab because I want to be able to do swells, which is what I'm going to add next here. So I've got my lead overdrive, I've got my amp and cab set up, I got my EQ, I got my reverb. Now I'm going to add a delay. Let's go. I always go to the mod chorus echo. It's just my favorite. I'm going to click here. Clicking here sends this into tap tempo. So I'm going to have it tap tempo, put some feedback. I'm going to bring up the low cut and I'm going to bring down the high cut. I'm doing that so that I can get the darkest trails. So doing that really makes the delayed sound, so it's not the exact same tone as the guitar. It's much darker, more analog sounding the darker it is. And I can keep the mix up higher and have a little bit more control over it. Let's add a little bit of that good chorus to it. Cool, so I am going to change this. Change my mind. Since I'm going to use a little bit more of a heavier delay, I'm going to change this to a plate reverb, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to up that pre-delay, get rid of these, bring that mix down. A little too much decay. You can hear that at the end. That just means there's a little too much decay. That sounds pretty cool, I think. Cool. So now if I want to do like a swell thing, liking the taper of the volume pedal, another thing that I would do, I'm going to swap this to logarithmic. So you have two options here. Linear is a more straight, direct swell up. Logarithmic is like a steady, it's like slower and then speeds up at the end. Could work a little bit better for swelling. A little bit smoother as opposed to consistency. Like the other way is a more consistent taper. This is more of a easier to manage sweep. All right, so we got a basic sound here. We could do some swelling. And you can hear how the gain is retained the whole sweep of that volume. If I move this to the front end, you'll hear the gain change. Where it almost goes from a clean to a dirty sound as opposed to being dirty the whole time. You be the judge. Which one do you like better? Let me know down below. So I think that'll about do it for this tone. I'll upload this to the Custom Tone website so you can check it out for free. Let me know what you think of it. Write down in the comments what you guys want to know more about as far as making a preset goes, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Whatever helped you, whatever didn't help you, let me know in the comments, and let's have a discussion about it. But yeah, this will be on the Custom Tone site for free. If you guys are interested in more presets of mine, I'll also link my marketplace presets. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.